I always believed my mother loved me. Not perfectly. Not gently. But in her own way. She raised me alone after my father died. Worked 2 jobs. Cried over unpaid bills. Told me again and again that everything she did for me. That's why when I heard her voice that night, I didn't move. I was standing at the top of the stairs, half asleep, when I heard her say something that froze my blood. How much are they offering? I thought she was talking about a loan. A job. Anything else. Then she laughed softly and said, "If the money's right, she's theirs." I leaned closer. My heart started pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. "She's young. Quiet. Obedient," my mother continued. "They won't have any trouble with her." I realized then. She wasn't talking about selling a house. She was talking about selling me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I didn't. Because I needed to hear how much my life was worth. I stayed there in the dark, listening as my own mother negotiated my future like a transaction. Dates. Conditions. Payment. And when the call ended, she said one last thing that changed everything. "Don't worry. She trusts me." She was right. I did. But trust has a limit. And that night, I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I started planning. Because if my own mother thought she could sell me, then she had no idea who she had raised. Don't skip this story. Because the way I survived her betrayal is something she will regret for the rest of her life. The house had always been too quiet at night. Not peaceful quiet. Careful quiet. The kind where you learn, very young, how to step on the loose floorboard without making a sound. How to hold your breath when someone's voice changes. How to tell, just from the way a door closes, whether it's a good night or a bad one. My mother taught me those things without ever meaning to. After my father died, it was just the 2 of us. She told everyone we were survivors. That we only had each other. And for a long time, I believed that meant safety. It didn't. It meant dependency. My mother, Elaine, was admired by everyone. "She sacrificed everything for you," people said. "She's such a strong woman." They didn't see what strength looked like in private. They didn't see how love always came with conditions. I learned early that being easy was safer than being honest. Being quiet was better than being curious. And asking questions only led to consequences. So I stopped asking. By 17, I had learned my role perfectly. I cooked. I cleaned. I studied. I stayed out of trouble. I trusted my mother because trusting her was the only option I had. She handled the bills, the paperwork, the phone calls. She always said, "You don't need to worry about adult things yet." What she really meant was, "You don't need to know." The night everything changed didn't feel important at first. It was late, past midnight. The house was dark. I had gone downstairs for water when I heard her voice coming from the kitchen. Low. Controlled. Different. I stopped halfway down the stairs. That's when I heard the word payment. Then documents. Then a sentence that made my stomach drop. "She doesn't ask questions. She trusts me." I stood there, frozen, my hand gripping the railing so tightly my fingers hurt. I knew somehow, instinctively, that if I moved, if I made a sound, whatever I was about to learn would disappear. So I stayed. I listened as my mother spoke to someone I had never heard before. A man. Calm. Professional. They talked about logistics. Timing. How she would be introduced. They talked about me like I wasn't a person. Like I was an object that needed to be delivered in good condition. When the call ended, my mother sighed. Not in relief, but in satisfaction. That sound did something to me. It broke something open. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I went back upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and sat on my bed in the dark until morning. Because I understood something terrifyingly clear. If I accused her, she would deny it. If I panicked, she would control it. If I ran, she would find me. The only safe move was to pretend I knew nothing. So I did. The next day, she made breakfast like always. Asked about school. Complained about money. Touched my shoulder affectionately as she passed behind me. I flinched, and then forced myself not to. Because that was the moment I realized something else. She wasn't afraid of hurting me. She was afraid of losing control over me. And control, once exposed, becomes fragile. From that day on, I listened. I paid attention. I memorized schedules. Passwords. Names. I started doing things my mother never expected. Not rebellion, but observation. I learned how she talked to strangers. How she lied with warmth in her voice. How she presented herself as a victim while negotiating power. And most importantly, I learned that she thought I was stupid. 2 weeks later, she told me we were having dinner with someone new. A family friend, she said lightly. Very generous. He wants to help us. Help. That word again. I smiled. I nodded. And I followed her out the door. Because by then, I already knew the truth. I just needed to see how far she was willing to go. And she had no idea. I was already planning how to survive her. The man arrived exactly on time. That alone told me something. People who are late usually feel entitled. People who are early usually feel in control. He stood on our porch holding a small paper bag, dressed neatly but not expensively, like someone who knew how to blend into any environment without drawing attention. His smile was calm, practiced. My mother opened the door before he even knocked. Come in, she said warmly, as if she'd known him for years. I stayed where I was, half hidden behind the hallway wall, watching. Elaine, the man said. It's good to finally meet you in person. They shook hands. Not like strangers. Like partners. This is my daughter, my mother said, turning slightly toward me. You remember her. The man looked at me then. Not openly. Not obviously. But with the kind of attention that weighs more than a stare. He smiled. Of course. I forced myself to smile back. That was my first test. And I passed. We sat down at the dining table. My mother insisted on tea. Insisted on snacks. Insisted on comfort. She was building an atmosphere. The man introduced himself as Richard. A consultant, he said. I help families with opportunities. He didn't look at me when he said that, which told me everything. My mother launched into her story. She always had a story. How hard life had been. How alone we were. How I was so responsible for my age. She's mature, my mother said proudly. Quiet. Never causes trouble. Richard nodded slowly. That's important, he said. Important. That word landed like a weight in my chest. They spoke as if I wasn't there. Not rudely. Strategically. Like adults discussing logistics around a piece of furniture in the room. There's a family, Richard said calmly. Very well resourced. Looking for someone reliable. My mother leaned forward slightly. What exactly would they expect? I held my breath. Richard paused just for a second. Adaptability, he said. Discretion. Gratitude. My mother nodded. She's good at all of that. She didn't look at me when she said it. Then came the question. Has she ever lived away from home? Richard asked. No, my mother replied quickly. But she's independent. She learns fast. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a sip of tea. Richard turned to me directly for the first time. Do you like to travel? He asked. I met his eyes. Yes, I said. I've always wanted to see more of the world. My mother smiled, relieved. Richard smiled, satisfied. They moved on to practical details. Timelines. Paperwork. Temporary arrangements. Every word was clean. Sanitized. That's how predators survive. They don't speak in violence. They speak in systems. At one point, my mother excused herself to the kitchen. The moment she was gone, the air changed. Richard leaned back slightly in his chair and studied me more openly now. You're very composed, he said. I've had good practice, I replied. Something flickered across his face. Interest. You know, he continued, most girls your age don't understand what's being offered to them. I tilted my head. And what is being offered to me? He smiled faintly. A way out. I almost laughed. My mother returned, interrupting the moment. Richard stood up shortly after. We'll be in touch, he said, shaking her hand again. There's potential here. Potential. My mother walked him to the door, talking eagerly. I stayed seated. My hands were shaking under the table. When the door closed, my mother exhaled like she'd just finished a successful performance. That went well, she said. Yes, I replied quietly. It did. She turned toward me, surprised by how calm I sounded. You understand why this is important, don't you? She asked. For us, she added quickly. There it was. The justification. She sat across from me, her voice softening. I know it sounds strange, she said. But this could change everything. How? I asked. Stability, she replied. Security. A future. For who? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, for both of us. It was a lie. But she needed to believe it. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. I lay awake replaying every word. Every look. Every omission. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was being prepared. Packaged. Transferred. The next few days were full of subtle changes. My mother became attentive in a way that felt transactional. She commented on my posture, my clothes, my tone of voice. "Smile less," she said once. "You look more serious that way." I nodded and remembered. She started keeping my documents in a locked drawer. Birth certificate, school records, medical papers. I noticed. She thought I didn't. Richard called twice. Once when I was home. Once when I wasn't supposed to be listening. I heard my mother say, "Yes, she's ready." Ready. Like I was luggage. I didn't run. I didn't confront her. Because by now I understood something critical. If I panicked, she'd accelerate the process. If I resisted, she'd tighten control. But if I stayed calm, I could learn everything. So I became agreeable. I asked questions that sounded innocent. I let her explain things. I let her feel in charge. I let her believe I was still hers. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She let me see the folder. Not intentionally. Just carelessly. On the kitchen counter. Brown. Thick. Labeled with a name I didn't recognize. Inside were copies. Emails. Travel plans. Amounts. Numbers with too many zeros. And next to them, a photocopy of my ID. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Not crying. Not shaking. Just absorbing. Because the truth had fully revealed itself now. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't survival. This was a business arrangement. And my mother wasn't a victim. She was a broker. That night she knocked on my door. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I opened it and smiled. "I trust you," I said. Her shoulders relaxed instantly. She hugged me tightly. Too tightly. She didn't know that in that moment, something had shifted permanently. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her observer. And observers, when patient enough, become witnesses. 2 days later, she told me we were leaving the city. "Just for a short trip," she said. "To meet some people." I nodded, packed a bag, and hid something small inside it. Something she'd never think to look for. Because she believed she owned me. And that belief was going to cost her everything. We left before sunrise. My mother liked early departures. She said it made travel smoother. What she really meant was fewer questions. She woke me up at 4:30 a.m., already dressed, already alert. Her movements were precise, efficient, like someone executing a plan she had rehearsed many times in her head. "Don't forget your jacket," she said casually. "It might be cold where we're going." Where we're going. She never said the name. The car ride was quiet. The city lights faded behind us as the highway stretched out, empty and indifferent. My mother drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, jaw tight. I watched her reflection in the windshield. She looked calm. That frightened me more than anger ever could. After an hour, she spoke. "You've been very mature about all this," she said. "I'm proud of you." I nodded. "I trust you," I replied. The words tasted bitter. But they worked. She relaxed slightly, like a predator reassured that its prey was still compliant. We stopped once for gas. She told me to stay in the car. I didn't argue. Instead, I memorized the place. The exit number. The brand of the station. The clerk's face. Details mattered now. 2 hours later, we reached a smaller town. Quiet. Orderly. Too quiet. The kind of place where nothing ever happened. And therefore anything could. My mother pulled into the parking lot of a modest hotel. "Just one night," she said. "Tomorrow we meet them." Them. The room smelled like detergent and stale air. 2 beds. She took the one closest to the door. Control again. That night, she made a call while I pretended to sleep. I listened. Not from the stairs this time. From 2 feet away. "Yes, we arrived safely," she whispered. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's cooperative." There was a pause. Then she said something I hadn't prepared myself for. "She's worth more than we discussed." My stomach turned. I kept my breathing slow. Steady. Invisible. When the call ended, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. This wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't theory. Tomorrow I would be handed over. But fear does strange things to the mind. It sharpens it. I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like a witness. At 6 a.m., while my mother showered, I opened my bag. Inside, hidden in the lining, was a small old phone. No data plan. No apps. Just battery. And 1 number saved. I didn't call yet. Calling too early would be panic. I needed certainty. I needed names. We met them in a private dining room at a roadside restaurant. 2 men. One woman. All well-dressed. All polite. They stood when we entered. Smiled. My mother smiled back, radiant. "This is her," she said, touching my arm lightly. "My daughter." The woman studied me with professional detachment. "She's younger than I expected," she said. My mother laughed softly. "She's always been mature." They spoke over coffee. Not about me. About logistics. Visas. Residency. Guardianship. Words designed to disguise ownership. One of the men turned to me. "Do you understand what's happening?" he asked gently. I met his gaze. "Yes," I said. My mother's hand tightened on my knee under the table. "Good." She was listening now. "And are you willing?" he continued. I paused. Just long enough. Then I said, "I trust my mother." The room relaxed. Except for one person. The woman. She watched me closely. Too closely. After the meeting, my mother was euphoric. "They liked you," she said. "Everything is moving faster than expected." She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't need to. She thought she already knew. Back in the hotel room, she began organizing papers. Passports. Forms. Copies. She hummed quietly. That sound made my skin crawl. That night she gave me instructions. What to say. What not to say. How to behave. "Remember," she said, brushing my hair. "This is for us." Us. The lie was almost convincing. When she finally fell asleep, I waited. 10 minutes. 20. Then I slipped out of bed quietly and locked myself in the bathroom. I turned on the fan. And took out the phone. My hands were shaking now. This was the point of no return. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. "Hello." I whispered. "I need help." I didn't give details. Not yet. I said where I was. I said I was being taken somewhere against my will. I said my mother was involved. There was a pause. Then, "Stay where you are. Do not confront her." I almost laughed. I had already learned that lesson. The next morning, my mother woke cheerful. "We're leaving soon," she said. "Pack lightly." I did. She didn't notice that my bag was lighter than before. She didn't notice that I was calmer. That was her final mistake. We drove for another hour. Toward the meeting point. Toward the end of her control. Halfway there, flashing lights appeared behind us. My mother stiffened. "What's this?" she muttered, pulling over. 2 cars. Unmarked. But official. A man approached the driver's side. "Elaine Carter?" he asked. "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Is there a problem?" "We need you to step out of the vehicle." Her smile faltered. "For what reason?" "Routine questions." She looked at me. Just for a second. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Another officer opened my door. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "I am now." They separated us. Asked questions. Checked documents. The folder. The phone records. The emails. Everything unraveled quickly once it started. My mother didn't scream. She didn't cry. She argued. That's how I knew she understood exactly what she had done. When they told her she was being detained, she finally looked at me. "You did this," she said. Not angry. Accusatory. As if I had broken a rule. I met her eyes. "No," I replied calmly. "You did." As they led her away, something inside me shifted. Not relief. Not victory. Clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being moved. I was standing still. And the world was rearranging itself around me. That night, I slept in a safe place. A place with locked doors and people who didn't smile too easily. I slept without listening. Without counting steps. Without preparing for the next command. I didn't know what would happen next. Courtrooms. Statements. Truth. But I knew one thing for certain. My mother hadn't raised a product. She had raised a witness. And witnesses, once they speak, change everything. Freedom didn't arrive the way I thought it would. There was no dramatic release. No rush of relief. No moment where everything suddenly felt safe. Instead, there were forms. Questions. Rooms with neutral colors and people who spoke gently but watched closely. The first place they took me wasn't a police station. It was a building designed to feel calm. Too calm. Soft lighting. Muted walls. A waiting room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. A woman introduced herself as a caseworker. Her voice was kind but practiced. "You're safe now," she said. I nodded. I had learned by then that safe was a word people used when they weren't sure yet. They asked me to tell my story. Not all at once. In pieces. Where did you live? Who handled your documents? When did you first suspect something was wrong? I answered slowly, carefully, because for the first time, the truth wasn't a weapon I needed to hide. It was evidence. They recorded everything. The phone calls. The trip. The folder. When I mentioned my mother's name, no one flinched. That hurt more than I expected. It meant they had heard worse. Hours passed. Someone brought me food. I didn't eat. I kept thinking about my mother in the other room. Not scared. Not crying. Arguing. She always argued when she lost control. Late that evening, a man in a suit came in. He didn't smile. He didn't pretend. "We're going to ask you some difficult questions," he said. "Not because we doubt you, but because the truth needs to be precise." I understood. Precision was the difference between justice and silence. They told me what I already suspected. This wasn't just about me. The people my mother had been speaking to weren't new. There were patterns, transactions, other names, some older, some younger. My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet. Witnesses don't collapse. They endure. The next day, I was taken to a temporary placement. A house with rules. Curfews. Check-ins. Therapists who asked questions I didn't know how to answer yet. "How do you feel about your mother?" one of them asked. I stared at the wall. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I feel accurate." 2 weeks later, I saw her again. In a visitation room. Glass between us. She looked smaller. Not broken, but exposed. She didn't start with apologies. She never did. "You went behind my back," she said quietly. I looked at her. "No," I replied. "I went in front of the truth." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand what I was trying to do." "I understand exactly," I said. "That's why I stopped you." She leaned forward. "They would have taken care of you," she said urgently. "You would have had opportunities one never had." I watched her carefully. "Not as a daughter. As a judge." "You didn't sell me a future," I said. "You sold control." That was the moment her composure cracked. "You owe me," she hissed. "After everything I sacrificed." I stood up. The officer behind me shifted. "I don't owe you my body," I said. "I don't owe you my life. And I don't owe you silence." The visit ended there. She was escorted out first. She didn't look back. The legal process took months. Depositions. Statements. Corroboration. I learned new words. Trafficking. Coercion. Abuse of authority. They sounded clinical. Detached. But they described my childhood with terrifying accuracy. At night, I dreamed of the house. The stairs. The kitchen. Her voice on the phone. I woke up shaking. Then breathing. Then steady again. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a loop. School felt strange when I returned. People looked at me differently. Some knew. Some guessed. Some avoided. I didn't explain. Survival teaches you that explanations are optional. One afternoon, my caseworker handed me a file. "You're old enough to decide some things now," she said. Inside were documents. Custody termination. Protective orders. A new guardian assignment, temporary. I read every page. This time, no one rushed me. "Do you want to see her again?" the caseworker asked gently. I thought about it. About the woman who raised me. Who fed me. Who sold me. "No," I said. "Not right now. Maybe not ever." The day the charges were formally filed, no one celebrated. There was no satisfaction. Just wait. Because justice isn't a victory. It's a responsibility. I was asked if I wanted to testify. Not because they needed me. They already had enough. But because my voice mattered. I said yes. Standing in that courtroom weeks later, I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the judge. I spoke clearly. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I had already cried enough in silence. When it was over, when the words guilty and sentencing filled the room, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel free. I felt empty. And then, light. That night, lying in a bed that wasn't haunted by listening, I realized something crucial. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, when you stop waiting for permission to exist. I didn't know what kind of life I would build. I only knew this. I would never again mistake control for love. And I would never again stay silent to keep someone else comfortable. Because the truth my mother never understood was simple. You can raise a child to obey, but you can't raise them to disappear. The sentencing took less time than I expected. Months of investigation. Years of damage. And then, One quiet morning in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. I sat in the second row. Not because I had to. Because I chose to. I wanted to see it clearly. Not as a daughter. As a person who had survived. My mother stood when the judge entered. She wore the same coat she used to wear to parent-teacher meetings. That detail stayed with me. Because it reminded me how easily monsters blend into ordinary roles. The charges were read slowly. Trafficking. Coercion. Conspiracy. Endangerment. Words that sounded unreal when paired with the woman who once braided my hair before school. She didn't look at me. Not once. Her lawyer spoke about hardship. Single motherhood. Financial stress. Poor judgment. I felt nothing. Because explanations stop working once the truth is complete. Then the judge asked if I wished to make a statement. The room went very still. Every sound sharpened. I stood. My legs didn't shake. That surprised me. I'm not here to ask for punishment, I said. My voice echoed softly. I'm here to ask for recognition. I paused. To recognize that what happened to me didn't start with a crime. It started with control. I told them about the quiet. The listening. The way love was conditional. I didn't describe fear. I described structure. Because structure is how abuse hides. I wasn't taken in chains, I said. I was raised to obey. That sentence changed something in the room. I felt it. When I finished, the judge nodded once. That was all. The sentence was read. Years. Not symbolic. Not light. Enough to matter. My mother reacted the way she always had when things didn't go her way. Not with tears. With disbelief. As if reality had violated an agreement she believed existed. When they led her away, she finally looked at me. Not with hatred. Not with regret. With confusion. Like someone who had lost a language they thought everyone else spoke. Afterward, people asked me how I felt. Relieved? Vindicated? Free. I didn't have words. Because what comes after survival isn't happiness. It's recalibration. The world didn't pause to let me catch up. School resumed. Paperwork continued. Life moved forward. I had to move with it. I was placed with a guardian who didn't try to replace my mother. That mattered. She didn't ask me to call her anything. She didn't demand gratitude. She gave space. Therapy was harder than court. Court asked what happened. Therapy asked who I was when nothing was happening. That question took time. There were days I missed my mother. Not her. The idea of her. The version I had needed her to be. Grief doesn't care about truth. It mourns what never existed just as fiercely. I learned how to do ordinary things without permission. Choosing what to wear. When to sleep. What to think. Freedom is heavy when you're not used to carrying it. One afternoon months later, I found an old photo. Me at 8 years old. Standing beside my mother. Both of us smiling. I studied it for a long time. Then I put it away. Some memories don't need rewriting. They just need boundaries. I finished school quietly. No speeches. No spotlight. Just completion. That was enough. On my 18th birthday, I signed my own documents for the first time. My own name. My own consent. That moment mattered more than the sentence ever could. People sometimes ask if I forgive her. I don't answer. Forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a private process. And mine isn't public property. What I know is this. I am not defined by what was done to me. But I am shaped by the moment I chose to speak. The system didn't save me. I activated it. That distinction matters. Years from now, my mother will be released. That knowledge no longer controls me. Because control only works when silence remains. I didn't destroy her life. I ended my captivity. And that's the truth that stays with me now. Not anger. Not revenge. But clarity. Some people raise children to love them. Some raise children to need them. And some raise children to belong to them. But children grow. And ownership has an expiration date. People assume survival ends when the danger is gone. It doesn't. That's just when it becomes quiet enough for you to hear yourself. Years passed. Not dramatically. Not symbolically. Just steadily. I moved cities. Changed schools. Changed my name on social media. Not to disappear. To choose who could find me. I learned how to live without scanning rooms. Without measuring footsteps. Without listening for tone changes. At first, the silence felt wrong. Like something was missing. Then I realized. What was missing was fear. I built a life out of ordinary things. A small apartment with sunlight in the morning. A job where my name meant competence, not history. Friends who didn't need explanations. They knew pieces of me. Not the whole story. That was enough. Therapy taught me something unexpected. That trauma doesn't live in memories. It lives in reflexes. The way you apologize for existing. The way you wait for permission. The way you mistake control for care. Unlearning that took longer than any court case. Sometimes late at night, I still remembered the house. The stairs. The kitchen. Her voice on the phone. But the memories no longer owned me. They visited. Then left. I heard about my mother through official channels only. Parole updates. Required notifications. No letters. No messages. She never tried to contact me directly. I don't know if that was restraint. Or pride. People asked if I ever wanted closure. I thought about it. Then realized something important. Closure is not something another person gives you. It's something you stop waiting for. One afternoon, years later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. Just one sentence. I hope you're well. No name. No apology. No explanation. I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. Some conversations don't deserve a reply. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. Anger had burned itself out long ago. What remained was clarity. I understood now that my mother didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a solution. To her fear. Her failures. Her lack of control. And when I stopped being useful, I became disposable. That truth hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped asking why. Why is a question that keeps you tied to the past. What now? That's the question that builds a future. I began speaking quietly. Not on stages. Not in interviews. But to people who needed to hear that silence wasn't strength. That obedience wasn't love. That survival wasn't weakness. Sometimes, I met girls who reminded me of myself. Quiet. Polite. Too responsible. I didn't warn them loudly. I simply told them this. If something feels wrong, you're allowed to trust that feeling. Most people don't hear that soon enough. On my 25th birthday, I went somewhere alone. No celebration. Just a long walk near the water. I watched the sun go down and thought about how many versions of me had existed. The obedient child. The observer. The witness. The survivor. And finally, the person. I realized something then. My life hadn't been stolen. It had been delayed. And now it was entirely mine. People love stories where evil is punished. But that's not the most important part. The most important part is this. I no longer needed my mother's shadow to understand my shape. If she ever thinks about me, I hope she understands one thing. Not with regret, but with truth. She didn't fail because she was poor. She failed because she chose control over care. And control never survives exposure. As for me, I don't carry her anymore. Not in my body. Not in my choices. Not in my future. I am not her daughter. I am not her victim. I am not her mistake. I am the person who listened. The person who spoke. And the person who walked away without needing permission. Some people raise children to keep them close. Some raise them to serve. And some forget that children grow. This is not a story about betrayal. It's a story about awareness. And what happens when silence finally decides to end. They tried to sell my future. I claimed it instead.